Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club, America's citadel of free speech for 98 years. My name is Susan Alcorn. I'm a member of the City Club Special Programs Committee. We're pleased to welcome you here today to a program titled Growing Cleveland, Market Gardens, Urban Farms, and Economic Development. Our discussion today is the third food-related program we've had here recently, and it reflects the growing interest we all have in local food, how and where it's grown, and the economic impact. It's definitely an exciting time for people involved in food production. I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for today's program, Dan Moulthrop. Dan recently left WCPN Radio as one of the hosts of Sound of Ideas for a new organization that seeks to educate, engage, and empower citizens. It's called Civic Commons. Dan?
Thank you very much, Susan. Thanks to all of you, too, for being here, and special thanks to David Pearl of the Cuyahoga County Food Policy Coalition and Myron Bennett of HEAL, that's Healthy Eating, Active Lifestyle, who helped organize today's event. I wanted to start a little unconventionally with a show of hands. How many people in this room are involved in growing food? Okay, now, how many of you who have your hands up right now actually sell the food you grow? Okay, that's really cool. I just wanted to know who was in the audience and what kind of sort of get the baseline. We talked about this, as Susan said, a couple of times in the past few months, and the last time we spoke about this, we were talking about local foods as we encounter them in restaurants, grocery stores, and farmers markets. And today we're talking about the growing aspect of this, but a particular kind of growing. That's growing done by farmers who look at empty lots and see not a house that's missing, but they see what's missing are pole beans and sweet corn and tomatoes. And it's really the perfect thing for Northeast Ohio, as you know, because so many of our cities have so many empty lots. That's true in Youngstown, where they're knocking down foreclosed homes every day, and it's true in Ohio City, where there's 6 acres of undevelopable land unless you want to put it into production. So this is the sort of thing, and I think you're all here because it's the sort of thing that provides hope to a lot of people. And we're going to dig into this, though. This isn't just about celebrating or patting each other on the back. This is actually really about digging deep and trying to figure out how sustainable all of this is, what the real growth potential is in this movement, and what it takes to make it actually profitable. What would it take to make, say, $20,000 or $30,000 a year on an urban farm? That's, probably what it would take to sustain at least one person. So you'll notice in a second that really what we're focused on Cleveland today. This is not because what's happening across the region isn't interesting, but because there's so much happening in so many different places that it's a little easier to focus on one city and use that as a case study for what we can learn elsewhere and learn about the whole movement. I'm going to introduce the panel in a second. We're going to start with a conversation up here, and then in the second half, as you know, we'll bring all of you into the conversation with your questions. We're all looking forward to that. And my introductions here are going to be very, very brief so that our guests can actually explain for themselves what it is that they do and why they do it. Robert Boggs, over here on the left, is the director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture. We'll actually find out from him just how much growth urban agriculture is seeing in Ohio, which has probably made his job somewhat different than that of his predecessors in the position. Ifeoma Ezopoi, I hope I pronounced that right. Was that right? It was close? It's good. Okay. Is with the City of Cleveland's Department of Economic Development, running the Gardening for Greenbacks program. Next to her, Graham Veazey, the project manager for the Ohio City Fresh Food Collaborative. That's a project of the Near West Development Corporation.
The Ohio City Near West Development.
The Ohio City/Near West Development Corporation. He is also a leader in the Cleveland Coalition, and he also happens to work with me on the Civic Commons project, but that's completely unrelated. And lastly, Peter McDermott, Entrepreneurs for Sustainability. Peter has the very inspiring title of Network Weaver, and he runs E4S's local food Cleveland program. He also runs a farm in the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood, so he's sort of a vertical integrated kind of guy in this whole deal. So Peter, let's start with you. And the basic framing question for this first round here is, what do you do, why do you do it, and why is it important?
Well, so yeah, like Dan said, I do wear a couple of different hats, both working on a half-acre urban farm on the near west side with my partner doing really entrepreneurial urban farming. So really looking at how can you create a sustainable business model for farming on less than an acre of land, and how do you generate significant revenues from that. And so we're about halfway through our second full season now, and so have some experience really from having my hands in the soil and sort of that micro level perspective. The other hat that I wear, like Dan said, is creating this local food Cleveland network, which is essentially a commons that I created through Entrepreneurs for Sustainability, or E4S. Really a common space where entrepreneurs, throughout the food system could, find inspiration, they could find connections, they could really find their place in the local food economy. And so we have monthly networking events that cover different topics. One example would be we had an event called So You Want to Be a Farmer, where we had some different farmers in the panel, and we drew over 250 people. So there's obviously a huge demand and interest in really becoming part of the local food system. And then we also sort of supplement those networking events with the localfoodcleveland.org online social network, which is a great online resource for all things local food related. And so those are the hats that I wear. And in terms of why I do it, I mean, I would need more than 2 minutes. But I guess there are three things that I would say just to sort of start off. The first would be that urban farming is hard. And I don't think we really want to paint a picture that's more rosy than we should, or we'll be at the risk of really creating a hype that can't live up to the reality. There are no get-rich-quick schemes. There are no shortcuts. It's the hardest thing that I've ever done, for sure. But despite all that, I think really what we need are more entrepreneurs here who are willing to take risks and do small experiments and figure out what works and what doesn't. And sort of coming back to all of the reasons why this is a good idea. From folks that I've talked to in other regions, I was just in Miami 2 weeks ago, talking to folks doing similar work in Columbus, is that really I think Cleveland is looked at on a national scale as being a leader in particularly, in local food in general, but I think particularly urban agriculture. And I think for all of the reasons you mentioned. And I think, for me, the greatest driver behind it, and I think what's driving a lot of the activity, is really just wanting to make Cleveland a better place. And so I think developing that sense of place is really sort of inherent in agriculture. And that's really how, that's what agriculture created 10,000 years ago, the first permanent civilization. So I think creating that community aspect and creating that sense of place, and then also trying to make a financially sustainable business out of it, would be the gist of it. Yeah.
Okay, Peter McDermott, thank you. Graham Veazey.
I'm here on behalf of Ohio City Near West Development Corporation, which is the CDC that services one of the most celebrated communities in Cleveland. And I'm the project director for the Ohio City Fresh Food Collaborative, which is a remarkable collaboration of folks that are looking at local food as a way to both take vacant land and turn them into productive spaces, but also how do you make it economically viable? So in the last 7 months have been focused on the Ohio City Farm, which broke ground June 30th. And that is a great project that involves a bunch of really passionate folks. And one of them is obviously the Ohio City Near West Development Corporation. You've got the Refugee Response, which is managing that property. You've got CMHA, whose land it is and really helped drive this program to fruition.